Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair. The date is October 10th, 2010, and I'm sitting here with a very old friend of mine who I've known for, as I was just calculating, 32 years. This is George Houle, antiquarian bookseller from Los Angeles, who I waylaid on the floor here at the fair to ask him to come to do this interview. George, thank you again for that.
You're welcome, Taylor.
Okay, good. And we met at the Seattle Book Fair in 1978, in case he doesn't remember.
Was that the first book fair?
That was the very first one here.
First and only.
Well, that was the first one and the only one in the Olympic Hotel. But, did you exhibit at that?
Yes.
You did. Was that the last time you did a Seattle Fair?
Yes, it was.
And that will remain the last time you...
I sold exactly one book.
Uh-huh.
A Virginia Woolf book.
And you probably sold it to a visiting dealer or something?
No, to a woman who came back 3 or 4 times and looked at it. And, and that was it.
Nobody ever said this was easy. So,
no dealer sales.
Oh, gee. Memories, huh? Well, we're happy you came to visit anyway. Tell us where you were born, a little bit about your early life, where you went to school.
I was born in upstate New York, near Albany, a place called Cohoes, which is where the Mohawk and the Hudson River sort of come a confluence, an old area where they used to have textile mills.
Right.
And my family had been there for a number of generations. And in the year I graduated from the 8th grade, whatever year that was, we came west. My mother had asthma, and we needed a different climate, so we came to Prescott, Arizona for a year, and then after that to Riverside, California, where I went to high school, Ramona High School.
I know that institution. After you graduated from high school, you went to university somewhere?
I went to Riverside City College and spent a semester at California Baptist College and Loma Linda University, Seventh-day Adventist school, and then I went on to USC and graduated from USC.
Well, what did you get your degree in?
I think it was history.
History? Oh, wow.
My major varied depending on the semester.
Well, that sounds like my
grades. I started in business. I wound up in sociology, and I think finally my advisor said you have enough units in history to graduate. So I
good.
So I suddenly had a history major.
Suddenly you were ready to graduate. That's nice. What sort of, did you have part-time jobs at this?
I worked in the university library when I was at USC, and when I was at Riverside City College, I worked at the Riverside Public Library. And prior to that, I was in the library at Ramona High School, where I went to high school.
So you had a background in libraries, although not a degree per se.
No, I have a degree I have a library degree
you do?
From Western Michigan University, 1967.
I see.
After SC, I worked for a period as a management trainee for the old S.H. Kreis company, the department store, and then I went to work as a medical social intake worker for San Bernardino County, and then went off to graduate school.
So you did was that part of your sociology degree?
Probably. It paid better than the Kreis situation did. They really exploited you, long hours and low pay, so when I was able to work for the county, I took that job, which was depressing to a certain extent because you interviewed old people who were ill. You went to nursing homes and made sure that they qualified for these programs at CalMed that they had at that time and other social programs.
Make sure they were sick enough and suffering enough.
Right.
Well, good. You're feeling terrible. We're fine. You're signed up.
And then I decided I wanted to go to library school, so I applied to all 30 library schools that were accredited at that time and decided the first one that accepted me I would go to, and that happened to be Western Michigan.
Clearly you were a motivated student at that point.
So I went to Western Michigan and got my MS degree there.
And then did you return to California?
I returned to California as acquisitions librarian at Corona Public Library. Corona Public Library. And then I transitioned from there to as assistant acquisitions librarian at Cal Poly Pomona. And from there I wound up at the Beverly Hills Public Library as audiovisual librarian, then acquisitions librarian, and then head of reference department at Beverly Hills Public Library. And in the meantime, when I was at Beverly Hills Public Library, Jake Zaitlin somehow got me involved in doing auction catalogs for Marvin Newman and the Ames Company. Mm-hmm. And that's how I sort of got into the auction end of the business. And at that time, Sotheby's was coming to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. They quietly bought out the Newman Company, right. Marvin Newman, and I did a catalog for them, having no idea of values, right. But I did a catalog of the Engelbart collection, which was really? The first collection that they got in.
Gee, I didn't know that.
The sale just exploded. I mean, my estimates were ridiculously low. Mm-hmm. Heritage was coming into the scene at that time, but the sale was very successful.
What year was that, George?
I think it was 72, but I'm around 72, I think, 71, 72.
So your background to that point, you were able to handle these books and describe them, but without any... I didn't know the values to any extent. With relatives.
I've been dealing in books since high school.
Oh, okay.
I had a company called Marcellus Books, and at that time there was no internet.
Of course.
And the libraries had a lot of federal money at that time, and somehow I figured out that I could get books that were out of print here in England, mostly through Blackwell's. They used to issue a series of catalogs. So I was importing books from England and selling them to colleges and universities.
Were those generally what we just refer to as out-of-print books?
They were out of print in the United States, but they were in print in England. And some of them never been printed here, but the libraries at that time weren't aware that you could get these overseas.
Right.
So
they were happy to have you.
They were happy to get them.
The middleman.
Right, and that's how I set up my little book business that put me through college, actually.
So you're yet another bookseller who started out in their teens,
right?
Like I did, and Bud Plant, who was just in here, also started in his teens.
Right. And I was selling books also at that time and doing scouting.
Yeah.
And luckily, just fell into some things.
Yeah, that's luck often.
And the Mission Inn went through one of its bankruptcy periods. I stumbled across a good group of books there.
Yeah. Well, after this Engelbart sale went so well, better than anyone.
They offered me a full-time job, and I left the library.
Yeah. Right.
At that time, went to work for Sotheby's and did a number of sales for them.
How long did you work for them?
Not a couple years. I'm not sure the exact dates, but.
And then at that point, you decided to open your own retail business.
Sotheby's was having financial problems. They were on the verge of closing down, and when the Bennett and Marshall Library came up, we had a dispute over that because I worked hard to get that, and they pulled it off from under me. They sent it to London.
Really?
And I was very unhappy over that, and left after that.
Yeah. Michael Thompson and Carol were just visiting with George Allen.
George Allen.
Apparently he's still going strong.
In fact, when I left Sotheby's, I went to work for Bennett and Marshall.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
And then went off on my own.
Now, what year would that have been?
Probably 74, 75, because I opened my own store in 76.
And that was on Westwood Boulevard, is that
No, my first store was on Melrose, near Crescent Heights. I think it was 8064 Melrose.
Oh.
So I was there a year and a half, or maybe a little longer, than Roy Bleiweiss, who had the store on Westwood Boulevard, decided to leave.
Right. You had Roy's old place.
I occupied Roy's store.
You remember the address number there?
I'd have to look it up.
Was it like the 2000 block of...
Well, it was between Olympic and Pico. That was when they called that the Book Row out there. There were many, many bookstores.
Yeah, the Kermans had Bookfinders, and Carmiole.
Carmiole was there. Science fiction guy Barry Levinson was there. There was a French bookstore. There was a Spanish bookstore. Vagabond later came there.
There was an archaeology firm.
Woman dealing in Egyptian books.
I can't remember who that was.
Frank Spellman was there.
I'd forgotten.
He occupied the little room behind my store. He always used to come in and use our restroom. Oh. He had no restroom. And
I have some stories.
We won't comment on that.
No, we won't.
And then for a short time, Gary Steigerwald opened the store back there.
No, I didn't.
He's kind of disappeared.
I don't even know where he is anymore. He was in Indiana, New York.
And then at that time, the guy that who's now at the Lilly Library worked for me, Joel Silver.
Oh, really?
Worked for me.
God.
Period of time, and so did, of course, Phil Beavis.
Yes, we remember him. Wonderful delicatessen down the street there, Juniors. Where
That's
I've had
right.
many a fine lunch. I always like to get in the plug for Juniors. Valet parking, too. How long did you stay on Westwood?
Probably 4 or 5 years, I don't remember.
To the early 80s?
To the early 80s.
Yeah.
I, at that point, realized if you wanted to stay in business, it'd be good to have your own building.
Yeah.
So you were in control, and the people that owned the building I was in kept saying they would sell it to me, but
They would.
I came to realize that I wouldn't live long enough probably. So I started looking around, and I found 7260 Beverly Boulevard, which was empty at the time, and oddly enough, it previously housed a book operation.
What was that?
They sold books to libraries.
Really?
What the heck was it called? I can't think of the name right off, but anyway, they had this was like a small Barnes and Noble, or at the time they wholesaled books to
I see.
the libraries, and the people had died. The business had been liquidated, and the relatives were selling the building.
So you were able to buy that building?
I was able to buy the building. Yeah.
That's nice. Now, remind me, that's...
Western Library Service.
Oh, okay. I know that.
Was the name of the business that was there.
During this period where you're getting established and working for the auction house through the library, and we were mentioning some of these other booksellers, were there any booksellers in the area or others you had contact with that you would have looked on as sort of, maybe not a mentor exactly, but somebody that you could kind of look to for?
Well, Al Cronfeld at Aldine Books was a big help.
Really? I don't
He had a store on Vermont.
Huh. Aldine Books.
Aldine Books.
I don't even
Al
know that.
Cronfeld, and he'd been in business a long time. He helped me on a number of times.
Oh,
He was
that's
sort of a
great.
father surrogate in a way.
Interesting. I'm sorry
And,
I never knew him.
Yeah.
So,
He sort of kept in the background, but he was a very good bookseller. Had a lot of contacts.
When I first started visiting Los Angeles, there were a lot of old timers still in business.
Charlie Salzman.
I was thinking of Charlie Salzman, Red at Baroque Books,
Right.
the ever popular Peggy Christian. Good word for everybody.
Well, when Peggy went out of business, I bought her.
You bought her inventory.
Bought her
Really?
inventory, fixtures, and
Oh.
actually took a lease on the building, and later bought the building she was in there on La Brea.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And
Have you hung on to that building?
no, I sold it.
Uh-huh.
I sold it. But I kept it a couple years. In fact, Al Cronfeld was running that other store for me
Oh, okay.
over there. He had retired and sold the store on Vermont,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was coming in and keeping that open.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know Maxwell Hunley?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Uh-huh.
You know, Max was in Beverly Hills, and then the building he was in got demolished, and then he moved to South Pasadena, and was there for a couple of years. And his daughter took over the business.
Right, I vaguely remember that.
But Max was an old-time bookseller that sold to a lot of celebrities. He built a lot of the old fine libraries in Beverly Hills. And then there was, of course, Cherokee Books. But before Cherokee was Harry Levinson.
Yes, Harry. When did he come out to California? Very early.
He'd been in a long time here. And
Since the 30s.
right.
sometime,
Yeah, he's sort of a contemporary of Jake.
Yeah,
type thing.
exactly. Did you mentioned Jake earlier, Jake Zaitlin, one of the legendary people in
Right.
the book trade. Did you have much of a working relationship with him after you went on your own?
Not really.
Not really.
Not
yeah.
really. But as I say, he got me into the auction end for whatever reason.
Right.
In fact, I asked him at the time why he didn't have one of his staff members do this, and
So you probably thought you could do it better.
well, I think he said he didn't want a conflict or something, or I don't know. But anyway, because before Sotheby's, I did maybe 6 catalogs for Newman auctions, and then Ames auctions, and maybe a few other places, just as a freelance basis.
You ever recall Harry Bierman of Pick a Book?
Of course, yeah.
What do you remember about Harry?
Well, Harry used to go to Ames auctions all the time
Yes.
and buy the libraries, and he sort of thought that was his fiefdom.
He did seem to think that.
In fact, I got started when I bought an art library at Ames auctions, and I think Harry resented that to a little bit. But anyway, and that's how I got started. I was dealing in art books. Some old library had turned up, and I bought the library,
Of art
and that
books.
gave me an inventory to get started after I left Bennett Marshall.
these days, I mean, you deal in a wide variety of things, but I would say that most people, when they think of a lot of the better stuff you deal in, it's film related, showbiz related.
Well, a lot. It's kind of a niche that we've discovered. The material's there, and,
right.
and I've become knowledgeable in it.
Yes,
so
yes, you have.
We've handled the Rosalind Russell Estate, George Cooker's library, which was probably the best catalog I ever did.
That was a beautiful catalog.
And then some of Jack Benny's estate we got.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And a number of others.
And you had a connection with the Zane Grey estate, as I recall, too. It's very interesting.
Going back to the 70s, yeah.
Right.
Right. When I was at the Sotheby's, one of the ex-wives of Romer Gray gave me some material to sell. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from Romer Gray when he found out about it, saying the material had been stolen. So I contacted the woman that had brought the material to me, and she brought in her divorce papers, and that wasn't the case at all. She had got this material as part of the divorce. So then when I contacted Romer, he turned out he really wanted to find out where she was.
Oh,
and she didn't want him to know that. So,
no.
But then again, he started giving me material to sell.
You could get a movie script out of that, too.
Right.
That's
and when I was at Bennett and Marshall, he brought us a number of manuscripts, which later got sold to Brigham Young.
God.
And,
what you've been in the trade as long as few people. I mean, it's hard to believe that somebody who entered the trade in the 70s is now considered an old timer. But I guess you and I would have to fall into the old timer category. You've seen certainly a lot of things change over the years within the trade. What do you think might be one of the more encouraging changes in the trade in the last 30 years?
Well, there's been interest in, for example, film material that didn't exist in the 60s and 70s. When Sotheby's did that Paramount sale of all the props, and then I did the first Marilyn Monroe sale ever.
Oh, really? When was that?
That was shortly after I went there. The son of a trash collector had picked up this material behind the house of Marilyn's mother.
Oh.
And we did the first ever Marilyn sale. And I started selling Hollywood material, sticking it in my sales, and that was unusual at that time, which it isn't today. Now they have sales of nothing but Hollywood material, but when I started doing it, people sort of looked down at it.
I'm trying to remember the year, the big MGM auction. As I recall, a lot of that material,
74 maybe.
Like a lot of that material went for very little money.
Very little.
Yeah.
But then the dollar was worth more in those days than it is today. But there wasn't the interest in that material that there is today. You didn't have these big prices that some of that stuff brings today. So that's been a big change, and the interest in just autographs has increased a great deal, both vintage autographs, historical, as well as more recent material.
What do you deal in much recent material? I gather you don't.
I don't.
No.
I don't deal in sports at all. I don't deal in aviation. I deal mostly in pre-1960. But sometimes other things come along. But a lot of the current material you can't trust.
Of course.
And the signatures are illegible anyway, so even if they're authentic, you can't tell what they are.
Well, the sports, you can't. Those haven't been trustworthy for years.
Sports material can't be trusted.
No,
at all.
never.
No, we deal more vintage material. And maybe half my business now is autographs. It's changed considerably.
That would be letters, documents, photographs, and inscribed books.
Inscribed books, and some memorabilia. Yeah. We've had that. We've sold Academy Awards.
Really?
We've sold, other memorabilia.
People have asked me a number of times about the legality of selling Academy Awards. Can you just explain?
Well, if
briefly?
they're before 1950, you can sell them. Starting in 1950, the recipients had to sign a document saying that they could not be sold except for $1 back to the Academy. But there's a catch in there. You have people that got awards before 1950 and then got awards later. And when they got the later awards, they had to sign a document that covered the earlier. So you have to be careful if you buy awards before 1950 to make sure they're not grandfathered in those later documents.
So somebody who won a lot of awards, you better be very careful.
Check.
Can you just give a few examples of some of the Academy Awards you sold?
We sold one for Boys Town.
For Best Picture?
screenwriter.
Oh, screenwriter.
There were
Who
two
was that?
screenwriters got, I don't remember the
Uh-huh.
name. There were 2 awards for screenwriting. It was shared by 2 people, and we had one of them.
That's nice.
And some of the others I can't talk about.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Some of them get sold quietly,
Yeah,
the ones
well,
after 1950, but
yeah.
you have to be very careful because the Academy is very litigious.
Yes.
And but we sold Paul Newman's not Academy Award, but his the one with the Golden Globe.
Golden Globe. Uh-huh.
And there's no restriction on those. We've sold Sergeant Bilko's Emmy. He got more than one, I found out later, but we sold that, and some other interesting things. We were lucky to get a lot of good Disney material, including his will, his social, his passport, and a lot of documents relating to the formation of Disney and Disneyland and various enterprises. And we were able to get those because they were considered as personal property. They weren't part of the Disney Corporation.
Disney Corporation. I
So
see.
the family sold a number of those, and we were lucky to get them.
But it's essentially what you're saying is that a lot of this material you have to be very careful as to who actually has title
Right,
to
you
it.
have to be very careful. And with the Disney stuff, we checked with the corporation
Yeah, that-
because we knew they'd
They'd come after
us if.
Yeah.
In fact, when I first saw it, I thought this must be out of Disney archives.
Yeah.
But it turned out that it wasn't.
It was okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, well, that's good. You have an open shop still?
Yes, we do.
But
We're more or less by appointment now, but
Right.
if we're there, of course,
Right.
we're there. But
Exactly.
we're open Wednesday through Saturday. Closed Monday and Tuesdays. We've done that for some time.
And who all is on the staff now? How many folks? do you
I have 3 staff members besides myself.
Now, I know Bo, of course.
Yeah, Bo and Masa and
Uh-huh.
Toshi. And,
Are you still sort of the shop manager? Or do you defer that to
no,
one
I
of the
still
others?
do the catalog and I still do the buying.
Yeah. Still do the buying. You're still traveling a fair amount for.
I'm doing more now than I used to.
I've noticed that. I
Yeah, I'm
like
doing
that.
more than I used to.
You were here in Seattle about a
Yeah,
year ago.
right. So I'm doing more traveling than going back to Boston. I'm not traveling as much overseas as I used to, but I'm doing more domestically.
How would you describe, say, 20 years ago, you going on a scouting trip versus going on a scouting trip now? How would you
Well, it's
contrast?
more difficult for one thing. You don't find the sleepers that you used to, so to speak. Part of it's because of the internet. Part of it's there's less material available, it seems like, and that's part of it. But the internet's made a tremendous difference. I mean, we've been able to help customers build collections just because of the internet that you could never have done before the internet.
That's another thing I was going to ask. Is
Yeah.
what kind of a impact, either beneficial or not, has the internet had on your business?
Well, it's had a tremendous impact, and you have to go along with it because that's the way the
course,
flow is going.
yes.
But it's created opportunities you didn't have before.
Exactly.
We stopped doing printed catalogs just because we can reach millions of people.
Right.
And with printed catalogs, we're mailing a few thousand. So now we're selling material that we might not have been able to sell before. In fact, I know we couldn't sell it
course.
just because you're reaching people in parts of the world where there's an interest in a certain item, and through catalogs you couldn't reach them. You didn't have those people on your mailing list. And
John Lang has pointed out that among many subject areas, high school and college yearbooks, which used to be very difficult to sell, now with the online listings, you can find somebody to buy almost any of them.
That's right.
It's quite amazing.
and there are people that specialize in them, nothing
Yes,
else
that's
but,
right, yeah.
but yearbooks.
yeah. No.
I think it's been overdone, but
Yeah.
because you see prices on some that I think are ridiculous, just because Ray Bradbury or Bukowski or someone's mentioned in a yearbook doesn't make it worth some of the prices that you see asked for
No, it
these
doesn't.
things.
If they have their picture and they've signed it, that's something
That's a
else.
different thing.
I've had Frances Farmer high school books that she signed, things like that. There are fewer open shops now, of course.
Much fewer, yeah.
Are you able to buy a lot of material via the internet too?
I am, but I'm very cautious because
Yeah.
things aren't always what they seem
No,
to be.
they're not.
And I try to get people to send things to me before I pay for them because for example, have bid on things that turned out to be nothing but a photocopy.
Yeah, when I was first buying things on eBay, I misread descriptions,
Exactly.
and I
I mean,
got
some
several photos of
yeah,
no.
and some descriptions are so long that you miss the key word.
One little line. Yeah,
They just hide these things in the description.
My old friend Wayne Moy referred to that as stoning you to death with popcorn. There's just so much information you finally just give up, and then you get a.
But you really have to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. A little off track. This is, you may be as specific or general as possible. Do you have was there something in your years in the trade that, like one particular incident or collection or contact or something like that, you look back on, you just really have a great feeling about, like it was just such a special thing to be part of, or a great deal you made or something like that?
Well, there have been a few.
Yeah.
It was the Bernheimer collection that I bought, and he was an old-time collector who had the best frost collection in the country. Sold through Park Burnett in the 50s, but he'd retained certain things. And a customer of mine who wanted a finder's fee one time, and he turned me on to this guy. But I got a very nice group of books from him, and 6 or 8 inscribed Oscar Wildes. It was quite a find, and at the time he just set his price on them, which was extremely reasonable.
Out of date, I'm sure.
And we bought some good film libraries that Maxwell Hunley put together. And even recently, sometimes you get lucky. I was at an auction house not too long ago that handles books and handles other stuff, and the different department heads there sort of don't speak to each other because they're competing. And I went into the movie sale was having, and there was a whole box of books on the floor, and they looked like they were mostly LECs, and some of them were complete and some of them weren't, but there was a sleeper.
Oh, good.
And so you still find exciting things.
Absolutely.
This was that book that Doris Ullman illustrated about
Roll Jordan Roll.
Roll Jordan Roll, the signed limited edition
that's too bad
with
for
the
you.
loose print.
Oh dear, well.
And my blood pressure shot up, and I thought all these other dealers are going to see this, and
they didn't.
I was able to buy the whole lot for about $800.
Oh, bless their hearts.
And that wasn't that long ago, and I thought to myself, this auction house should have spotted this. But Roll Jordan Roll looks just like a limited edition book in the slipcase. But there it was. I knew the book because I'd handled it a long time ago. And
I've never had one. I had one in my hand one time, but it didn't belong to me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I mean,
nice.
we sold the book for like $18,000.
Yeah. Oh, I believe
And
it.
it would bring more today, but it was just the big mistake on the auction house. It was from the John Ford Library, oddly enough.
Good.
These were all his books.
Isn't that something?
And it just happened to be there, and I was sure other dealers had spotted it, but luckily I couldn't believe when they didn't.
Well, this is very instructive.
So you can still find
Yeah.
sleepers, but it's much tougher. It's not like the old days.
But it can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. It all depends on knowledge.
And that would have been a great find 20 years ago.
That's right. That's right.
But
Well, the original copy of that I had, I was working when I was at USC. I was working for a bookstore that sold used magazines of all things, and every day I used to take the owner's car and go to the Salvation Army and these other places where stuff came in, and that's where I got my first copy of Roll Jordan Roll. It did not have the slipcase, but it did have the extra print.
Oh.
And all the tissues were kind of sticking out of the book.
Oh.
But anyway, I was able to buy it, and
For what, $1 or something?
I think
$5.
she gave it to me actually when I asked her what she wanted for it.
Poor fellow, here's his
And then later sold it for, I think that point, Dick Moore of International
International
Bookfinders bought it for I
Bookfinders.
think $700 at that time.
What a great guy. The first LA book fair I did, he came by my booth, he bought a pen rod and a jacket, and I started to write it up and give him a discount. He said, I don't want a discount. No, you just get your price. I'm going to do fine. He was a great guy.
And that was before the internet, and he was very good at finding and selling things.
Well, that certainly is a end of the business that has declined, is the search service.
Right.
Now every person is his or her own
They
search
do their own
service.
searching, yeah.
That's right.
That's completely declined.
Do you anticipate keeping the shop open, and more specifically, do you have any plans to retire from the book trade?
I don't know. I keep thinking I'm edging that way, but it doesn't seem to be going very fast. So.
Well, Ken Carmichael has been telling me that for 12 years, that he's edging to retirement, and I don't see that either. So, but for the foreseeable future, you're
Still going to be there.
You're
I
hanging
guess,
in with us, doing, I hope, more traveling. And, looking for
I'm
books.
trying to relax more and just
Yeah.
take it easy.
Yeah. Well, next time you come to Seattle, don't make it during the fair. It'll be more relaxing. We'll have more fun. Okay?
Okay.
All right. George, thank you very much for sitting down for a chat. I appreciate it.
Okay, Taylor.
Good. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.